Billionaire witnesses. Black Maid shielding his frail father. What follows stuns the mansion's scene. Inside one of the wealthiest mansions in America, an unthinkable scene played out. A fragile old man, the father of a billionaire, suddenly collapsed in front of the household staff. While everyone froze in shock, one woman didn't hesitate. She wasn't a doctor, she wasn't family, she was a black maid who had been working quietly in the shadows of that house. But in that moment, she became his shield, his strength, and his protector. What happened next didn't just stun the mansion, it changed the course of one billionaire's life forever. You're watching Story Globe, where real stories come alive. If you enjoy powerful, life-changing tales that leave you thinking long after the video ends, then hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what we've got lined up for you next. The mansion stood high on the hills outside of Atlanta, its long driveway curling past oak trees that had seen more than 100 years of history. Behind the iron gates sat a house that seemed more like a museum than a home. Crystal chandeliers glowing against polished marble floors, walls lined with paintings that could each buy an average family 10 houses. It was the kind of wealth that turned heads, but for the people inside, it was just another Tuesday. The billionaire himself, Nathaniel Brooks, had built his fortune in tech apps and platforms that touched millions of phones across America. To the public, he was a genius businessman, a man whose name carried power, but inside that mansion, his world was quieter. His father, Walter Brooks, a man once sharp and strong, was now frail. Age had bent his back, slowed his speech, and tested his spirit. Yet Nathaniel loved him deeply. The old man had raised him in a modest neighborhood before wealth ever entered their lives. Walter's condition required constant care. Nurses came and went, but Nathaniel, busy with meetings and flights, could never shake the guilt of not being by his father's side as much as he wanted. That was why the staff mattered so much. They weren't just cooks and cleaners, in many ways they were the backbone of the house, the silent hands holding everything together. Among them was a woman named Evelyn Carter. She was in her late 40s, African-American, soft-spoken but sharp-eyed. She worked as a maid, often seen dusting the grand staircases or polishing silver that hadn't been used in years. To some she was invisible, just another employee in uniform. But to Walter Brooks, she was different. She greeted him every morning with respect, sometimes slipping an extra pillow behind his back, or making sure his tea wasn't too hot. She treated him less like a patient, and more like a person. On that warm summer afternoon, when the incident unfolded, the mansion was buzzing with quiet routine. Nathaniel had just returned from a board meeting, walking through the hallway with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made assistants scramble. Walter was sitting in the sunroom, a thin blanket draped over his legs, staring out at the garden that reminded him of the small backyard he once tended in his youth. Evelyn was nearby, dusting a row of family photos that stretched across the mantelpiece. It happened suddenly. Walter leaned forward, clutching his chest, his face draining of color. His body trembled, and before anyone could react, he slumped to the side. The room went still, the sound of Nathaniel's footsteps halting mid-conversation. For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. Most of the staff gasped, some stepping back, paralyzed by fear. But Evelyn didn't hesitate. She dropped the feather duster, rushed to Walter's side and slipped her arms around him, lowering him gently so he wouldn't hit the floor. She called his name firmly, shaking him lightly, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Her hands shielded his chest, as if protecting him from some unseen blow, her eyes darting toward the hallway where Nathaniel now stood frozen, phone slipping from his grasp. Nathaniel had seen plenty of emergencies in boardrooms, but nothing could prepare him for this. The sight of his frail father in distress, held not by a doctor or a nurse, but by a maid whose strength seemed to come from someplace deeper than duty. Nathaniel's first instinct was to rush forward, but his feet stalled as he watched Evelyn in action. She wasn't panicking. She tilted Walter's head carefully, checked his breathing, and with a voice that carried both urgency and calm, she shouted for someone to call. The butler scrambled for the phone, his hands shaking, while the younger housemaids looked on, their faces pale with fear. Evelyn, though, stayed locked in, speaking to Walter as though her words alone could anchor him to life. "Stay with me, Mr. Brooks. Breathe slow. That's it. You're not alone. I've got you. Her voice had weight, the kind that reminded you of someone who had seen hardship before, someone who understood that fear only made moments like this worse. Nathaniel crouched beside them, his own hands trembling as he reached for his father's arm. The image seared into his mind, his father, so small now, lying helpless, and Evelyn shielding him as though she were family. The paramedics arrived within minutes, though to Nathaniel it felt like hours. Evelyn didn't step back until they took over, and even then she hovered, watching closely as if she wouldn't allow a mistake. They lifted Walter onto a stretcher, attaching wires and oxygen, and one of them asked who had been with him when he collapsed. Evelyn raised her hand, her uniform wrinkled, dust still clinging to her sleeves. The paramedic nodded in respect. You did the right thing, he told her. Nathaniel followed the stretcher out, but before getting into the ambulance, his eyes met Evelyn. It wasn't just gratitude he felt, it was something heavier, something that shook him. He realized how easily he had overlooked her all these years, how rarely he had considered the lives of those working in his home. And now, here she was, the reason his father was still breathing. At the hospital, Nathaniel waited through the long hours of tests and treatments. His mind kept circling back to Evelyn. He thought about the quickness of her response, the steadiness in her eye. He thought about the contrast between her and the rest of the staff, how she had stepped forward when others froze, and he couldn't shake the question, who really was Evelyn Carter? Back at the mansion, whispers spread. Some of the staff admired her bravery, while others murmured that she had overstepped, that her job was to clean, not to act like a nurse. The line between duty and humanity was drawn sharply in their mind. But those whispers didn't matter, because one thing was clear: Nathaniel Brooks had witnessed it himself, and he wouldn't forget. The next day, after Walter had stabilized, Nathaniel returned to the mansion. He was exhausted, his tie loosened, eyes heavy from lack of sleep. He found Evelyn in the laundry room, folding linens as though nothing had happened. She didn't look up when he entered, just continued her work, her movements methodical. "Evelyn," he said quietly. She paused, then lifted her head, surprised to see him there. "Yes, sir." Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice softer than usual. "I saw what you did yesterday. You saved my father's life. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." Evelyn's eyes flickered with humility. "I just did what needed to be done, Mr. Brooks. Anyone would have done the same." But Nathaniel knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have done the same. Not everyone had her courage, her clarity under pressure. He studied her face for a moment, then asked, "How did you know what to do? You moved like you've been through this before." There was a pause, and Evelyn lowered her gaze to the basket of linens. "Life teaches you things, sir. Sometimes the hard way." Nathaniel didn't press her right away, though her answer lingered in his mind. He had built his empire by asking questions, by digging deeper when others walked away. But with Evelyn there was a different kind of hesitation. He didn't want to seem like he was prying, yet something about her words, "Life teaches you things," kept echoing. That night, after checking in on his father at the hospital, Nathaniel returned to the mansion alone. The staff had gone quiet for the evening, retreating to their quarters. Only a faint light glowed from the kitchen, and there, he found Evelyn cleaning up after the late meal. She moved slowly, humming under her breath, the kind of song that sounded like it came from childhood. "Long day?" Nathaniel asked, leaning against the doorway. Evelyn straightened, startled to see him again. "Every day's long when there's work to be done," she replied with a small smile. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I can't stop thinking about how you handled yourself. You weren't scared, you were steady. That's rare." She placed the dish towel down, sighing softly. "Truth is, Mr. Brooks, I was scared. But fear doesn't help when somebody needs you. I've seen enough to know that if you let fear take over, you lose more than you save." Nathaniel studied her face in the dim light. The lines etched around her eyes hinted at stories untold, burdens carried quietly. He finally asked, "Evelyn, what have you seen?" There was a long silence. She looked down at her hands, calloused from years of labor, then back at him. "I used to work in a nursing home before I came here. My own mother was sick too. Diabetes took her slow, and I had to learn how to care for her. Sometimes the nurses were too busy, sometimes nobody came when she called, so it was on me. I guess that's where I learned what I did yesterday. Her voice cracked slightly, but she held herself firm. I promised myself after she passed that if I ever saw someone in need, I wouldn't wait for somebody else to act. Because sometimes nobody comes. Nathaniel felt the weight of her words. Here was a woman who had lived through hardship most people couldn't imagine. She wasn't just a maid. She was someone molded by pain, by love, by resilience. Evelyn, he said, you deserve more recognition than I can give in a thank you. But Evelyn shook her head quickly. I don't do it for recognition, sir. I do it because it's right. That's all. The humility struck him. In his world of boardrooms and billion-dollar valuations, every move was calculated, every gesture tied to status or advantage. But Evelyn, she operated from a different place, a place of principle. Over the next few days, Nathaniel couldn't help but watch her differently. When she passed through the hallways, he noticed the way she greeted every staff member equally, whether they were cooks or groundskeepers. When Walter returned from the hospital, Nathaniel saw how Evelyn placed a hand on his father's shoulder as she adjusted his chair, speaking to him with the respect of a daughter. One evening, Nathaniel overheard Walter chuckling as Evelyn told him a story from her childhood in the South. His father's laugh, so rare these days, echoed through the house like sunlight breaking through clouds. Nathaniel stood outside the doorway, listening, realizing how much warmth this woman had brought into a home that often felt like a cold museum. Still, not everyone in the mansion shared that admiration. The house manager, a man named Gerald, who prided himself on order and hierarchy, whispered to Nathaniel in private, "Sir, if I may, Evelyn is becoming too familiar. She forgets her place." Nathaniel looked at him sharply. Her place? Gerald, yesterday she saved my father's life. Where exactly would you place that? Gerald faltered, his lips tightening. With all due respect, sir, staff must remain staff. Lines mustn't blur. But Nathaniel's jaw clenched. The world he grew up in before the money had no such lines. His father had taught him that dignity didn't come from wealth, but from how you treated people. And watching Evelyn reminded him of those lessons. That night, Nathaniel made a quiet decision. He needed to know more about Evelyn, not just as an employee, but as a person. He wanted to understand the life that had shaped her into the woman who had shielded his father without hesitation. And what? Nathaniel waited a few days before he acted. He didn't want to spook her, didn't want her to think he was prying for the wrong reasons. But curiosity has a way of growing roots. Every time he watched Evelyn move quietly through the mansion tending to his father, folding sheets, offering soft words, he felt the weight of questions pressing on him. Who was she outside of these walls? What kind of life did she return to when she left this place? One Saturday afternoon, when the staff was given a half day, Nathaniel made a decision. He told his driver he'd handle things himself, and followed Evelyn from a distance as she left the mansion gate. She didn't know he was behind her. She walked briskly, her uniform tucked into a simple bag, her hair pulled back. She caught the city bus at the edge of the neighborhood, sitting by the window with her hands folded tightly in her lap. The bus wound its way out of the wealthy suburbs and into a part of town Nathaniel hadn't seen in years. Cracked sidewalks, faded paint on the houses, corner stores with neon lights buzzing above the doors. Children played ball in the street while mothers called them back inside. Evelyn stepped off the bus at a small apartment complex that looked tired but lived in, the kind of place where every neighbor knew the other's struggles. Nathaniel parked discreetly and watched as she carried a grocery bag up 3 flights of stairs. Moments later, he saw a young boy, maybe 10 or 11, burst out of the apartment door and wrap his arms around her waist. Her face lit up, a smile warmer than any he'd seen her give inside the mansion. She ruffled the boy's hair, then handed him an apple from the bag. For a long moment, Nathaniel just sat in his car, stunned. Evelyn had a child. She wasn't just a maid, she was a mother holding a household together on her own. The next day, back at the mansion, he approached her carefully. They were in the kitchen again, this time early morning, when the house was still quiet. "Evelyn," he began, his tone gentler than usual, "I didn't mean to pry, but I saw you yesterday. I know about your son." Her eyes widened, then narrowed slightly. "You followed me?" Nathaniel winced. "Not exactly, I needed to understand. I hope you can forgive me." There was a long pause, the kind that stretched heavy in the air. Finally she sighed. "His name is Marcus. He's 11. His father's not in the picture, so it's just me and him. That's why I work 2 jobs. Here during the day, and nights at a diner. I don't have the luxury of rest." Nathaniel felt a lump form in his throat. "And still, when my father collapsed, you had the strength to step up." She looked at him firmly, her eyes carrying years of quiet endurance. "Strength doesn't come from rest, Mr. Brooks. It comes from knowing people depend on you. My son depends on me. And in that moment, your father depended on me too. That's all I needed to know." For the first time Nathaniel saw the complete picture. Evelyn wasn't just a woman doing a job. She was a warrior in her own right, fighting battles unseen, carrying a world on her shoulders while still finding space to care for others. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. He sat in his father's study, staring at the old man's favorite armchair, remembering his childhood. Walter Brooks had always said, "Character isn't shown when it's easy. It's shown when you've got nothing left but still give everything." And now Nathaniel realized, Evelyn embodied that truth. The next morning, he made a quiet vow to himself, whatever it took, he would not let Evelyn's sacrifices go unseen. She had saved his father. She had taught him humility. And now, he wanted to repay her in a way that would change her life forever. The morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the mansion. But the house didn't feel warm. It felt heavy, thick with silence. Walter was slowly recovering, his color returning bit by bit, his spirit lifted by Evelyn's steady presence. Nathaniel noticed the way his father's eyes softened whenever Evelyn entered the room. She didn't hover, she didn't treat him as fragile, she treated him like a man still living, still worthy of dignity. But as Evelyn's presence grew more noticeable, so did the whispers. Staff members exchanged looks when she lingered by Walter's chair, when she was the one he asked for a glass of water, when his wrinkled hand reached instinctively for hers instead of theirs. At breakfast one morning, Gerald, the house manager, cleared his throat while Nathaniel stirred his coffee. "Sir, forgive me for speaking plainly, but I believe the lines are beginning to blur with Miss Carter. She's taking liberties not suited for her role. It could unsettle the order of the household." Nathaniel set his spoon down slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Order? Gerald, are you suggesting that caring for my father is a disruption?" Gerald stiffened, his jaw tightening. "I only mean, sir, there is a way things are done. Staff should remain in their place." Walter, sitting at the head of the table, let out a dry chuckle. His voice was raspy but sharp. "Gerald, I was raised in a 2-room house where neighbors helped each other because they had no choice. If Evelyn is out of place, then maybe the place is wrong." The room fell silent. Nathaniel's lips curled slightly. His father hadn't lost his edge. But Gerald's disapproval didn't fade. He bowed politely and left, though the tension lingered like smoke. Later that day, Nathaniel called Evelyn into his father's study. She walked in cautiously, her uniform neat, her hands folded. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Nathaniel gestured toward a chair. "Sit, Evelyn, please." She hesitated before taking the seat, her eyes darting around the room filled with leather-bound books and old photographs. Nathaniel leaned forward. "You've been more than staff here. You've been a friend to my father, and to me. I won't let anyone diminish that. I want to change your role in this household. I want you closer to my father, not as a maid, but as his personal aide, someone he can rely on fully." Evelyn blinked, stunned. "Miss Brooks, that's too much. I'm just—" He cut her off gently. "No, you're not just anything. You're the reason my father is alive today. You've given him laughter again. That's more than some doctors have managed." Her lips trembled slightly, though she fought to keep her composure. "But the others, they'll talk. They already do." Nathaniel's voice hardened. "Let them talk. I don't run my company by gossip, and I won't run this household by it either." Walter, who had been dozing lightly in the corner, stirred and looked up. "Son, she's earned more than anyone in this house. If you don't see that, then you're blind." Evelyn's eyes welled with tears. She quickly brushed away. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Walter whispered with a faint smile. And so she did. From that day forward, Evelyn's role shifted. She accompanied Walter on his walks through the garden, managed his medication schedule, and even read aloud to him in the evenings. The mansion began to feel different, lighter in some corners, heavier in others. The admiration from Walter and Nathaniel was undeniable, but behind closed doors the staff's resentment grew. Evelyn had crossed an invisible line, and though she carried herself humbly, they saw her as a maid who had forgotten her place. Some whispered words like favoritism, others hinted at impropriety. The venom of envy had started to seep into the walls of the Brooks mansion. Nathaniel knew it, he heard it, and yet he didn't care. What mattered was that his father had found a friend, a guardian, in a woman everyone else underestimated, but he also knew resentment had a way of festering, and sooner or later it would come to a head. It didn't take long for the whispers to turn into something heavier. The staff who once ignored Evelyn now eyed her with quiet suspicion. Some were cold in their greetings, others refused to meet her gaze at all. The change in atmosphere was sharp enough that even Walter noticed. One afternoon, as Evelyn adjusted his blanket, he muttered, "They look at you like you stole something." Evelyn forced a small laugh. "I suppose I did. Time. I spend more with you now than they do." Walter gave her a knowing glance. "Don't you ever let their jealousy make you shrink. You hear me? You saved me, Evelyn. That makes you family, whether they like it or not." But outside the mansion walls the murmurs reached further. At a private dinner one evening, Nathaniel's business associates caught wind of the story. Over glasses of aged whiskey and plates of steak, one of them leaned across the table. "Nate, I hear your maid has become something of a confidant to your father. Word is she's practically running the household." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Her name is Evelyn, and she's my father's." The man smirked. "Come on, don't get sentimental. You're a Brooks. Appearances matter. You can't just elevate the help without consequences. Investors, partners, they watch everything. It's not a good look." Nathaniel set his glass down firmly, his voice cold. "If saving my father's life is a bad look, then maybe I need different partners." "Listen to me," he said, gripping Evelyn's hand with surprising strength. "Family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up when the walls are falling. Evelyn, you've become family. And I want you to remember that, no matter what." Evelyn's lips trembled. "Mr. Brooks, I don't know what to say." Walter smiled faintly. "Say you'll keep looking after my son when I'm gone. He'll need someone with a good heart beside him." The room grew still. Nathaniel's throat tightened. He met Evelyn's gaze, and in that silent exchange something shifted. Respect deepened into something more, something unspoken, but undeniable. That night, after Walter had fallen asleep, Nathaniel found Evelyn in the kitchen, rinsing teacups. "My father's right," he said quietly. She looked up. "About what?" Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice low. "About you being family. You've given us more than service, you've given us life, dignity and hope, and I don't want you to ever doubt that you belong here." Evelyn swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking deep. For so long she had lived as though invisible, her worth measured only in hours worked and bills paid. But here, in this mansion of marble and whispers, she had been seen, truly seen. And for the first time the mansion didn't feel like someone else's world. It felt like hers too. Winter came quietly that year. The mansion's windows frosted at dawn, and the fireplaces burned longer into the night. Walter's strength, though, grew weaker with each passing week. Evelyn never left his side. She read to him when his eyes failed, sang softly when pain kept him restless, and whispered prayers when sleep finally came. One evening, Nathaniel received a call while in the city. It was Evelyn's voice, soft but urgent. "Mr. Brooks, you should come home. Your father's asking for you." He rushed back, snow crunching under his tires as he pulled into the long driveway. In the master bedroom, Walter lay frail against the pillows, his breath shallow, but his eyes alive with clarity. Evelyn sat beside him, holding his hand. Nathaniel knelt at the bedside. "I'm here, Dad." Walter's lips curved into a weak smile. "Good. Both of you are here." His eyes shifted between Nathaniel and Evelyn. "That's how it should be." Nathaniel's throat tightened. "Don't talk like that." But Walter only chuckled faintly. "Son, life has no guarantee. Except this money fades, businesses rise and fall, but the people who stand with you when you're weak, they're your true wealth. Don't forget that." He turned his gaze to Evelyn. "Promise me you'll keep guiding him. You've got a strength he needs." Tears slid down Evelyn's cheek. She squeezed his hand gently. I promise, Walter sighed, a peace settling over his features. Good, then I can rest. Within the hour, he was gone. The mansion was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against the heart. Nathaniel bowed his head, grief cutting deep. Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him, her own tears falling freely. In the days that followed, the household shifted. Staff who had once whispered against Evelyn now looked to her with respect. Nathaniel, though drowning in arrangements and condolences, found strength in her presence. She wasn't just helping, she was holding the family together. At the funeral, Nathaniel delivered the eulogy, his voice steady but raw. My father taught me that wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in the lives you touch. He lived that truth, and he left me with people who remind me of it every day. Evelyn, you were his light when the world dimmed. For that, my family will honor you always. Evelyn bowed her head, humbled beyond words. Weeks later, after the guests had gone, and the mansion grew quiet again, Nathaniel called Evelyn and Marcus into the study. The fire glowed warmly, casting soft light over the room. You both belong here, he said simply. Not as outsiders, not as staff, but as part of this family. Whatever the future holds, we face it together. Marcus's eyes widened, hope sparking in his young face. Evelyn pressed a hand to her heart, overcome. And so the mansion that had once been cold and distant found new life. It became a home not built on marble and chandeliers, but on loyalty, sacrifice, and love that crossed every line society tried to draw. Nathaniel kept building his empire, but now with a clarity his father had passed down. Evelyn continued to serve not as a maid, but as a cornerstone of the household. And Marcus thrived, his dreams stretching far beyond the walls his mother once thought would trap them. The mansion had been stunned once, when a black maid shielded an old man's fragile frame. But what followed was even more stunning, a legacy of courage, compassion, and family that no fortune could ever buy. And that, dear friends, is how one act of courage inside a mansion changed not just a billionaire's outlook, but an entire family's destiny. Evelyn walked in as a maid, unseen and underestimated. She walked out as family, carrying a legacy of loyalty and love that no amount of money could ever replace. It's a reminder to all of us that sometimes the strongest people in the room are the ones nobody notices until the moment that matters most. Thank you for watching this powerful story here on Story Globe. If this story touched you, leave a comment below and tell us what part moved you the most. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, because we've got more life-changing stories coming your way. Stories that will open your heart and keep your mind turning long after the video ends. Until next time, keep believing in the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. This is Story Globe, and we'll see you in the next story. Nathaniel's voice softened. No, you're the woman who shielded my father with your own hands. You're the reason he's alive to talk with me today. And that means you're not just anything, you're someone I owe more than I can repay. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked quickly, refusing to let tears fall. Mr. Brooks, I don't need your pity. It's not pity, Nathaniel said firmly. It's gratitude, and it's respect. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old clock on the mantel. Finally, Evelyn drew in a shaky breath. Marcus, he's bright, smarter than I ever was at his age. He wants to be an engineer, but I don't even know if I can keep him in a good school. I'm doing all I can, but it feels like I'm running in place. Nathaniel's chest tightened. In that moment, he understood exactly what needed to be done. Not for recognition, not for appearances, but because Evelyn and Marcus deserved the chance to dream without limits. That night he made a decision. He would not only honor Evelyn inside the mansion, he would honor her life outside it, and he would start with Marcus. The next morning, Nathaniel called his assistant into the study. His tone was crisp, but his eyes carried an unusual softness. I need you to look into the scholarship programs at West Bridge Academy, and I want every detail: application dates, requirements, tuition coverage. No stone unturned. The assistant blinked. For your family, sir? Nathaniel shook his head. No, for a boy named Marcus. He's the son of someone very important to this house. That same week, Nathaniel began making quiet calls, pulling strings where necessary. He didn't announce his intentions, not even to Evelyn. He wanted it to be real, not charity. Marcus's grades, his test scores, even his teacher's glowing remarks. Nathaniel made sure all of it reached the right hands. By Friday he held a sealed envelope on his desk. That evening Evelyn arrived at the mansion as usual, wearing her uniform, her hands a little rough from the week's work. She went straight to Walter's side, fluffing his pillows and making sure his tea was just the way he liked it. Nathaniel stood by the door watching her move with quiet grace. When Walter drifted off to sleep, Nathaniel approached. "Evelyn, could I speak with you a moment?" She nodded, wiping her hands on her apron nervously. "Of course, sir." He led her into the study. On the desk sat the envelope, its seal unbroken. Nathaniel picked it up, turning it over in his hands before offering it to her. "This is for you, for Marcus." Her brow furrowed. "What is it?" "Just open it." She carefully tore the seal, her fingers trembling slightly. As her eyes scanned the letter, her lips parted, her breath caught in her throat. "West Bridge Academy," she whispered. Her eyes flicked up to Nathaniel. This is an acceptance letter. Full scholarship. How is this possible?" Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Marcus earned it. His teachers spoke highly of him. His test scores are excellent. All he needed was for someone to shine a light on what he's already accomplished." Her hands shook as she clutched the letter. "Mr. Brooks, this school, it's one of the best in the state. It could change his whole life. But, I never would have dared to dream." Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "You dreamed enough to carry him this far. All I did was open a door. He'll walk through it because of you, Evelyn." Tears slipped down her cheeks now, unguarded. She shook her head, laughing through her sobs. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't even cover it." Nathaniel's gaze softened. "Say nothing, just let him chase the future he deserves. And know that none of this changes who you are. You've earned my respect 100 times over. This is just the beginning." Evelyn sank into a chair, holding the letter to her chest. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders, the exhaustion, the long nights, the doubt, it all felt lighter, as though the universe had finally shifted in her favor. That night, when she returned home, Marcus was waiting at the table, scribbling on his homework. Evelyn set the envelope in front of him. "What's this, Mama?" he asked. "Read it, baby." Marcus unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning the words, then they widened, his mouth dropping open. "West Bridge, full ride. Mom, I got in?" He leapt from his chair, hugging her tightly, his laughter ringing through the apartment. Evelyn held him close, tears streaming, her heart swelling with pride and relief. "Yes, baby, you did it. You're going to West Bridge." For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, life could be more than survival. The news of Marcus's scholarship spread faster than Evelyn expected. She hadn't told anyone at the mansion, but Walter noticed the glow on her face, the lightness in her step. One evening, as she poured his tea, he chuckled. "Something's different about you, Evelyn. You're smiling like a woman who's been given back the sun." Evelyn hesitated, then admitted softly, "My son, Mr. Brooks, Marcus, he's been accepted into West Bridge Academy, full scholarship." Walter's eyes twinkled. "Ah, that's no small thing. That's a life-changing thing. I knew that boy had the same fire I see in his mama." Across the room, Nathaniel listened quietly. He didn't speak, but his chest swelled with pride, not in himself, but in the moment, in the way Evelyn's sacrifices were finally being honored. But not everyone shared that pride. Some staff whispered still. Gerald's allies, though quieter now, muttered that Nathaniel was blurring lines, that the maid was becoming too close. At a dinner with business associates, one of them even made a sly remark. "You've always run a tight ship, Nathaniel, but I hear you've grown sentimental about one of the staff." The table chuckled softly, but Nathaniel's expression hardened. He set his fork down and leaned forward. "You know what sentimentality looks like?" he asked evenly. "It looks like a woman saving my father's life when no one else moved. It looks like her working 2 jobs to keep her son in school, only for him to earn his way into one of the best academies in the state. If that's what you call sentimentality, then I'll take it over arrogance any day." The laughter died instantly. Silence fell over the table, broken only by Walter's proud nod. Back at the mansion, Nathaniel began involving Evelyn more deeply, not just in household matters, but in decisions about Walter's care, in moments of family importance. Slowly, lines blurred. She was no longer the maid, but the trusted heart of the household. One afternoon, Walter called both Nathaniel and Evelyn to his room. His voice was weak, but his eyes were sharp. Nathaniel, though, had grown more protective than ever. He knew trouble was brewing and he was ready to face it head-on. But he didn't yet realize just how far the storm would spread, or how it would test not only Evelyn's strength, but his own character as a man and as a son. The storm came on a Friday evening, not with thunder in the skies but with a quiet tension in the mansion walls. Walter had just finished dinner, Evelyn helping him to the parlor for his nightly tea. Nathaniel had been delayed by a conference call, but the atmosphere downstairs was already buzzing. Gerald had gathered a few of the staff in hushed conversation, his voice low and bitter. "She's overstepping," he hissed. "She isn't one of us anymore. And the master, he doesn't see it. But I do. She's using sympathy to climb." The cook frowned. "Gerald, she saved Mr. Brooks' life. You can't deny that." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "And now she acts like she owns the place. If she's not stopped, she'll replace us all. Mark my words." Later that night, as Evelyn prepared Walter's tea tray, Gerald strode into the parlor uninvited. His steps were heavy, his expression sharp. Walter looked up, startled. Evelyn straightened immediately, sensing the edge in the room. "Gerald," Nathaniel's voice rang out from the doorway. He had returned earlier than expected, his eyes catching the scene instantly. "What's this?" Gerald bowed stiffly. "Forgive me, sir, but I can't keep silent any longer. This woman," he jabbed a finger toward Evelyn, who stiffened, "is meddling in matters above her station. The staff are unsettled, the associates are whispering. You risk your family's name by giving her such favor." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "Gerald, let me remind you of something. My father's name doesn't depend on gossip. It depends on truth, and the truth is Evelyn saved his life. She gave him more joy these past weeks than you or anyone else in this house has managed in years." Gerald's face reddened. "Sir, you're blind. She's manipulating enough." Nathaniel's voice cracked like thunder. The air seemed to shake. "You think because she wears a maid's uniform, her worth is less than yours? Then you've already forgotten what loyalty means. This mansion isn't held together by titles, it's held together by people with heart. And Evelyn has more heart than anyone here." The room went still. Walter's weak chuckle broke the silence. "That's my boy. Finally speaking sense." Evelyn stood frozen, her eyes wide, tears threatening to spill. She had never asked for defense, never sought praise. All she had done was what felt right. And now, to hear Nathaniel stand so firmly, it shook her more than Gerald's venom ever could. But Gerald wasn't finished. His pride burned too hot. "Sir, if this continues, you'll lose respect. Staff won't stay. Business partners will question." Nathaniel cut him off again, his tone icy. "If respect means turning my back on decency, then it's not respect I want. And if staff can't stomach working beside a woman who showed more courage than all of us combined, then they can find the door." The weight of his words hung heavy. One by one the staff looked away, none daring to side with Gerald openly. The cook shifted uncomfortably, the butler stared at the floor. Gerald's mouth opened, then shut. He had overplayed his hand. Nathaniel stepped closer, his eyes locked on Gerald's. "You forget yourself. You serve this house, and this house belongs to my family. If Evelyn is not welcome here, then neither are you." Gerald's face drained of color. For the first time in years, the authority he thought he carried crumbled. He bowed stiffly, muttered something under his breath, and left the parlor. The door shut behind him. The echo final. Silence settled. Evelyn's hands trembled as she set down the tray. "Mr. Brooks, I never wanted to cause trouble." Nathaniel turned to her, his voice soft now. "You didn't cause trouble, you revealed truth. And sometimes truth shakes the walls. But don't you ever think you did wrong." Walter smiled faintly from his chair, his voice weak but steady. "Son, keep people like her close. They're rarer than all the money you've got." Nathaniel nodded, his chest tightening. And for the first time in a long time, the mansion didn't feel like stone and marble, it felt alive, pulsing with the weight of change. The days that followed Gerald's departure felt different. The mansion grew quieter, less poisoned by whisper. Some of the staff remained wary of Evelyn, but with Gerald gone, the edge of hostility faded. Walter seemed stronger each morning, asking for Evelyn by name, sharing stories from his youth, while she listened with the patience of a daughter. Nathaniel, though, found himself restless. He couldn't shake the image of Evelyn returning home each night to that small apartment, to the boy who had wrapped his arms around her waist with such joy. It gnawed at him, the thought that the woman who had given so much to his family was fighting her own silent battles in the shadows. One Saturday, without telling her, Nathaniel drove to her neighborhood. He parked near the same apartment complex, watching kids ride their bikes through puddles, their laughter echoing against the cracked wall. He spotted Evelyn walking down the sidewalk with Marcus at her side, a backpack slung over his shoulder. They were heading toward the corner store, talking quietly. Nathaniel stayed far enough not to intrude, but close enough to see the tugging at Evelyn's hand, pointing at a comic book in the shop window. Evelyn smiling but shaking her head gently. She didn't buy it. Instead, she counted her change carefully and bought milk, bread, and a few apples. When they returned to the apartment, Nathaniel sat in his car for a long time, his hands gripping the wheel, the weight of what he'd seen pressed hard. She wasn't just carrying 2 jobs, she was stretching every dollar to hold her household together. That night, back at the mansion, he waited until Evelyn had finished helping Walter to bed. She found him in the study, staring at the fireplace though no fire burned. "Mr. Brooks?" she asked cautiously. He turned, his expression softer than usual. "Evelyn, may I ask you something personal?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Marcus. He's a good boy, isn't he?" Her eyes widened slightly. You saw us." Nathaniel lifted a hand. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy. I just needed to understand. I saw you in the store, Evelyn. I saw the way you stretch to make ends meet, and it's not right." She swallowed hard, her voice low. "It's the life I know. I work, I provide, and I pray it's enough." Nathaniel stepped closer. "It shouldn't just be enough. You deserve more." "He deserves more." Her shoulders straightened, pride flashing in her eyes. "I don't take handouts, so everything Marcus has, I want him to know his mama earned it." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I respect that. But helping someone isn't always a handout. Sometimes it's just doing what's right." There was silence between them, thick and heavy. Evelyn looked down, her hands twisting together. "Why do you care so much? I'm just your man." "Listen to me," he said, gripping Evelyn's hand with surprising strength. "Family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up when the walls are falling. Evelyn, you've become family. And I want you to remember that, no matter what." Evelyn's lips trembled. "Mr. Brooks, I don't know what to say." Walter smiled faintly. "Say you'll keep looking after my son when I'm gone. He'll need someone with a good heart beside him." The room grew still. Nathaniel's throat tightened. He met Evelyn's gaze, and in that silent exchange something shifted. Respect deepened into something more, something unspoken, but undeniable. That night, after Walter had fallen asleep, Nathaniel found Evelyn in the kitchen, rinsing teacups. "My father's right," he said quietly. She looked up. "About what?" Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice low. "About you being family. You've given us more than service, you've given us life, dignity, and hope, and I don't want you to ever doubt that you belong here." Evelyn swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking deep. For so long she had lived as though invisible, her worth measured only in hours worked and bills paid. But here, in this mansion of marble and whispers, she had been seen, truly seen. And for the first time the mansion didn't feel like someone else's world. It felt like hers too. Winter came quietly that year. The mansion's windows frosted at dawn, and the fireplaces burned longer into the night. Walter's strength, though, grew weaker with each passing week. Evelyn never left his side. She read to him when his eyes failed, sang softly when pain kept him restless, and whispered prayers when sleep finally came. One evening, Nathaniel received a call while in the city. It was Evelyn's voice, soft but urgent. "Mr. Brooks, you should come home. Your father's asking for you." He rushed back, snow crunching under his tires as he pulled into the long driveway. In the master bedroom, Walter lay frail against the pillows, his breath shallow, but his eyes alive with clarity. Evelyn sat beside him, holding his hand. Nathaniel knelt at the bedside. "I'm here, Dad." Walter's lips curved into a weak smile. "Good. Both of you are here. His eyes shifted between Nathaniel and Evelyn. That's how it should be. Nathaniel's throat tightened. Don't talk like that. But Walter only chuckled faintly. Son, life has no guarantee. Except this money fades, businesses rise and fall, but the people who stand with you when you're weak, they're your true wealth. Don't forget that. He turned his gaze to Evelyn. Promise me you'll keep guiding him. You've got a strength he needs. Tears slid down Evelyn's cheek. She squeezed his hand gently. I promise. Walter sighed, a peace settling over his features. Good, then I can rest. Within the hour, he was gone. The mansion was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against the heart. Nathaniel bowed his head, grief cutting deep. Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him, her own tears falling freely. In the days that followed, the household shifted. Staff who had once whispered against Evelyn now looked to her with respect. Nathaniel, though drowning in arrangements and condolences, found strength in her presence. She wasn't just helping, she was holding the family together. At the funeral, Nathaniel delivered the eulogy, his voice steady but raw. My father taught me that wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in the lives you touch. He lived that truth, and he left me with people who remind me of it every day. Evelyn, you were his light when the world dimmed. For that, my family will honor you always. Evelyn bowed her head, humbled beyond words. Weeks later, after the guests had gone, and the mansion grew quiet again, Nathaniel called Evelyn and Marcus into the study. The fire glowed warmly, casting soft light over the room. You both belong here, he said simply. Not as outsiders, not as staff, but as part of this family. Whatever the future holds, we face it together. Marcus's eyes widened, hope sparking in his young face. Evelyn pressed a hand to her heart, overcome. And so the mansion that had once been cold and distant found new life. It became a home not built on marble and chandeliers, but on loyalty, sacrifice, and love that crossed every line society tried to draw. Nathaniel kept building his empire, but now with a clarity his father had passed down. Evelyn continued to serve not as a maid, but as a cornerstone of the household. And Marcus thrived, his dreams stretching far beyond the walls his mother once thought would trap them. The mansion had been stunned once, when a black maid shielded an old man's fragile frame. But what followed was even more stunning, a legacy of courage, compassion, and family that no fortune could ever buy. And that, dear friends, is how one act of courage inside a mansion changed not just a billionaire's outlook, but an entire family's destiny. Evelyn walked in as a maid, unseen and underestimated. She walked out as family, carrying a legacy of loyalty and love that no amount of money could ever replace. It's a reminder to all of us that sometimes the strongest people in the room are the ones nobody notices until the moment that matters most. Thank you for watching this powerful story here on Story Globe. If this story touched you, leave a comment below and tell us what part moved you the most. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, because we've got more life-changing stories coming your way. Stories that will open your heart and keep your mind turning long after the video ends. Until next time, keep believing in the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. This is Story Globe, and we'll see you in the next story.